Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter and on TikTok. And folks, the star of the show is always you, so please do send in your comments, send in your questions and tell us where you're coming from. Tonight we have a special show. This is a 1.5 hour show. A 1.5 hour show, 90 minutes, folks, tonight, because as a guest, we have on with us the great and much requested David Scott of a UK column. There's the man there, and this show will be from 7 until 8:30 tonight, not finishing at 8, but 7 until 8:30. We'll be bringing David on a little earlier, round about 7:25, and we'll be taking him right through till round about 8:20. 55 minutes with David Scott of the UK column, and we're going to be talking and answering the question, what is the SNP? What is the Scottish National Party? And this is the time to ask that question, because it's a very strange party, isn't it? It has been running Scotland as a one-party state since 2007, when Alex Salmond moved in shortly after he had centralised Police Scotland. Well, no, that was prior to him centralising Police Scotland. He didn't centralise Police Scotland until just before the 2014 referendum, which he was hoping to win. And it's been on a centralising agenda ever since. Many of its policies appear far more globalist than they do nationalist, far more internationalist than they do as far as looking out for Scotland, the nation, is concerned. So there's lots of questions around the SNP, and we're going to be delving into some of them, and I'm sure you'll also have your point of view, and please do weigh in with your thoughts on that matter as well. So really good show lined up, and it's going to be a cracking interview, which I know is going to do extremely well on social media, because our previous videos with David on YouTube and on TikTok especially got thousands of views. And we'll also have our On This Day in British History and our competition coming up round about 7:20, a little bit earlier this evening. And as you can see from the flag in the background, we are preparing for the run-in to the Coronation, which is an amazing day in British history that will be remembered, as all British coronations are, for eternity. And so we're looking forward to that particular day. That's Saturday the 6th of May. So it's coming up very shortly, folks. And our prize at the bottom of the hour as well will be this little coronation badge. Check that out. King Charles III Coronation. God Save the King. We've got a little selection of these, and this one will be going out today to the winner of our competition. And to enter our competition, all you have to do is send the answer by email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. And if you haven't entered before, you will have a good chance of winning, and that's all you have to do, folks. The competition question coming up around about 7:20. Chap on TikTok asks, do you like Britain? Absolutely, you figured that one out, so well done. We absolutely did. Where did you get your accent, says Susie. Susie, I don't have an accent. This is just how words sound when they're pronounced properly. That's not my joke, by the way. That's somebody else's. Marmo says, I would love one of these, please. Are you talking about the shirt? Hallow says, do you like Elvis? Do like Elvis a lot. Thank you. Please do on TikTok give us a follow, because we deserve a lot of follows on TikTok. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe on YouTube, because YouTube is doing us wrong. They're doing us wrong. They absolutely are. We should have far more subscribers on YouTube than the small amount which we have built up after about 10 years on the platform. But we keep going on YouTube anyway, and sometimes we hit it lucky. Lots of people to say hello to this evening. AR Entertainment was first in from the heart of rural England. I wonder where exactly you mean by that, AR Entertainment. It sounds mysterious and interesting. Debbie says, good evening, everyone. The SNP still imploding. They are indeed, Debbie, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Derek Hart says, good evening, Alistair and fellow Unionists around the world. Another SNP scandal keeps growing yet again. The Treasurer, Colin Beattie, has been released for further investigation. And as we always say, of course, it's an ongoing investigation, and one is conscious about the Contempt of Court Act, but there's no harm in reporting what's going on without, and none of us are casting any aspersions. Derek wondered, are the police too scared to charge in case of riots in Scotland? Well, do you know what? There wouldn't be any riots in Scotland. That's for absolutely certain. I saw somebody on Twitter saying, if they arrest Sturgeon, there'll be rioting. Of course there's not going to be. Maybe there'll be parties full of joy, but nobody's going to riot. It's not like these people are organised in that way. I mean, most of the militant Scottish nationalists they're usually over like 96 years old, most of them. I'm joking, of course. Maybe 86 might be more accurate. In other words, they're not people who are going to want to riot. Oh, Harry says, good evening to Unionists everywhere. Hope you're well. We absolutely are. And Adam says, hello from the heart of the great British state of England. Hello to Catherine also, and to Stuart from sunny Elgin. And what a sunny day it's been today. It's beautiful out there. Absolutely beautiful. Hi, Derek, and to Kat. And greetings from White Cliffs country, where there will be bluebirds over. And Derek is watching from Armadale, great British village of Armadale. Now, Adam says, on this day in British history, April the 19th, Gwyndawr Way National Park opened its doors for the first time in 2002, which allows people to celebrate Welsh culture and natural history in the footsteps of Owen Glyndwr on a peaceful trail. Sounds very interesting. I noticed today that at the coronation ceremony is going to be led by a Christian cross from Wales, a Welsh cross, I think it was, which sounds very interesting. And that's what I would hope would happen at the coronation. You know, they talk about, oh, will the coronation be integrating other religions? Well, what I would like to see first and foremostly is the coronation integrating far more British elements than it has in the past. Bringing in elements from Northern Ireland, bringing in elements from Wales, bringing a much more Scottish element into it as well. Because while I love the coronation and so on, there can be sometimes an over maybe more of that sort of an English tradition in it, whereas what it needs to be is much more a British tradition. So I'm really glad to see, for example, today them talking about this Welsh cross that they were bringing in, and this Welsh design and Welsh Celtic cross, I think it was. So that's wonderful. So that's what we should be having in the British coronation, and also bringing in elements of the Commonwealth as well into that, to make it a reflection of the British world first and foremost, before you start going into any other of the religious points of view. Make it much more of a ceremony reflecting the British world here in the British Isles, and also the British Commonwealth as such, of which Charles is going to be the king. So it should really have an element from each, certainly, of all the British realms, as well as all parts of the British Isles. But hey, nobody asked Alistair McConnachie to put together the British coronation ceremony. But imagine if they had. Imagine how good that would be. Anyway, let's hope that the guys that they've got doing it know what they're doing at this late stage. Alan hopes to catch up soon. Well, let's talk about the possible arrest of a lady called Nicola Sturgeon. Now, we're told that everybody on Twitter is saying, including newspapers, are saying that the Sturgeon arrest is imminent. And I do like that word, imminent. Everything can be made more exciting, I think, by using the word imminent. If you say imminent, everybody goes, whoa, amazing. It's like, I'm getting out of bed. Getting out of bed is imminent. Whoa! Brushing teeth is imminent. Pouring the milk onto the cornflakes, imminent. Waiting for the bus, imminent. Going to Asda, imminent. Going to bed, imminent. You see how exciting life can be when you throw in the word imminent. It's amazing. Anyway, so we're told that the Sturgeon arrest is imminent. And whether it is or not, who knows? But let's keep saying that anyway, because as somebody said, for a while we were saying resign Sturgeon, and none of us really believed that she ever would resign. And then boom, she resigns. So if you say Sturgeon arrest imminent, maybe that'll actually happen. Who knows? Anyway, this follows the arrest of a chap who we are told is the SNP treasurer, and we have a picture of him here. His name is Colin Beattie, and that's him there. We're told, he's a rather menacing looking individual. We're told he is the treasurer of the Scottish National Party. And I don't know if that's right. I'm going to ask my assistant producer, are you sure that is Colin Beattie? Oh, that's Colin. Right, sorry, yeah. That's Colin Beattie. That's Colin Beattie. The other guy was, I think, from EastEnders, was Phil Mitchell. That's right. This guy is actually the actual treasurer. Apparently he's called Colin Beattie. Nobody's ever heard of him before, but the world hears about him when he gets arrested, which is basically par for the course as far as Scottish National Party backbenchers and apparatchiks are concerned. Okay, nobody ever hears about them until they get arrested. And that's the first thing that they do that makes it into the public eye, is getting arrested. Apparently that's the way it works if you're associated with the Scottish National Party. So he has been released today without charge, and the police do that. They arrest you and they'll just bring you in for questioning to help them with their inquiries, as they say. So he's been arrested without charge, and the question is, will Nicola Sturgeon be nicked next? That was the Scottish Sun's headline. If you're on TikTok, you won't see these photographs. go to our youtube.com/UK a force for good. But it says, will Nick be nicked next? Humza on spot over SNP fraud probe. Goodness me, isn't he just on the spot? And he's almost on the spot to the point where you feel a little bit sorry for him. Let's put up a video here of him being questioned. I believe it was yesterday.
Well, look, I can't comment on a live police investigation. It's clearly a very serious matter indeed.
Have you suspended him from the party? Have you suspended him from the party or the group?
I've said already that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that's the premise.
Will you take him off the Public Audit Committee in the meantime?
Look, again, I'll consider that. I'll have to speak to Colin Beattie. My understanding is he's still in the police station being questioned. Clearly, when he's off that, I'll need to have a word with Colin, not about the live police investigation. We can't speak about the detail of that, but clearly there are pertinent issues around his role, Public Audit Committee, and his role, of course, as the National Treasurer.
Are you surprised that he's been arrested?
Well, yes, of course I'm surprised when one of my colleagues has been arrested, but it's a very serious matter indeed.
Does this threaten to derail what you're talking about here in Parliament this afternoon?
It certainly is not helpful. Of course, I wanted to, and I will, I'm still determined, of course, to articulate what my vision is as a new leader and a fresh start for the government. So I'll still do that, of course, at 20 minutes past 2, and I hope that we can move on to speak about those issues. But look, I'm not going to take away from the fact that the timing of this is far from ideal.
Now, the police are obviously investigating past activities in the SNP. Can you guarantee that the party isn't operating in a criminal way right now and since you became leader?
No, certainly, I don't believe it is at all. No, I mean, I've, as you know, instructed a review into transparency and good governance, and of course with the issue around financial oversight, and I want some external input into that. So there is change that is needed within the way how the party is operated. I've made that absolutely. I have to get to the group meeting. I'll of course be around, so I'm certain you guys will have time for questions.
So I certainly do not believe that it is operating in a criminal manner, as he put it there. So that's good to know that we are not operating in a criminal manner. And thankfully, time will tell, however, won't it? And one has to almost feel kind of sorry for him, because he must have got so excited when he told his mum and dad that he had been elected as the leader of the Scottish National Party, only to realise that he had been set up basically as the fall guy, who was going to take all this bucket loads of the proverbial on his head. I mean, none of which he knew about. None of which he knew about, if we are to take him at his word. And so, as somebody put on Twitter today, it's like the king is given a golden crown only to be told that he's handling stolen property. That's almost what it amounts to. And so, if I was him, I would be raging. I would be like, could somebody not have told me that this was coming down the line? But nobody did, because everybody's looking after themselves. So to be frank with you, I think he handled that quite well as you possibly could, after you've just been handed stolen property and told that you are now legally responsible for it. Or alleged stolen property, I should say. Alleged stolen property, I should say. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, folks, we've got our man David Scott coming up in just over 5 minutes at 25 past 7. If you're on TikTok, you won't see our interview with the legend who is David Scott of UK Column. But just shortly before that, I want to tell you some news which I heard through the grapevine, which was circulating heavily at the weekend. As you know, Coronation Day is going to be on Saturday, the 6th of May. And the Scot Nats are going to be having a march. They had already planned to have the march on the 6th of May. And when they heard it was the coronation, they just continued on with it. But that's going to be earlier in the day. Basically, it must just be like a grassroots group are calling for everybody to George Square, all the pro-UK people to George Square at 5 o'clock, once the march is well out the way, everybody, and once the coronation is over, and that's the message that's been circulating, celebration after the coronation, George Square, Glasgow, from 5 p.m, Saturday the 6th of May. So folks, their Twitter and their Instagram and their Facebook is George SQ 6 May 5 p.m. George SQ 6 May 5 p.m, and that's basically just celebration after the coronation, George Square, Glasgow, from 5 p.m, Saturday the 6th of May. So that's something that's going to be good. I'm certainly going along to that myself, and going to be flying the flags, because at the end of the day, we are talking about a united kingdom, and if you believe in the United Kingdom, then you understand the monarchy is a strong part of that. And you don't have to particularly like the person of the monarch. It's about loyalty to the crown rather than necessarily the person of the monarch. And that's the way it's been in Scottish history and in British history, going right back. It's loyalty to the crown, and the crown of the United Kingdom, which will be getting placed on Charles's head on Saturday the 6th of May. Now, just before I do, on this day in British history, we'll have a question coming up afterwards for this coronation badge, which is a nice wee one, which is a pin badge. And send your answers, folks, to contact@aforceforgood.uk. If you haven't done this before, easy to do. You could be in with this important little symbol and badge. Now, on this day in British history, the 19th of April, the man who is said to have created the British Empire died in 1861. Now, when we talk about the British Empire here, we're talking about the post-American Revolutionary British Empire. The American Revolution, when Britain essentially lost the 13 colonies, was in 1783. And Britain, of course, had an empire since the early... Well, if you want to talk about the United States being part of the British Empire, we had that since we first landed in Roanoke back in the end of the 1500s. However, the post-American Revolution British Empire, the empire through the 1800s, the man who's been credited with doing a lot for that is a Scotsman, of course, called Charles Pasley, and he was born in Eskdalemuir back in 1780. And he entered the Royal Military Academy when he was a young man, and he rose to become a general. And let's put up a picture of him here. And he's credited with developing the ideology. And he wrote an essay on the military policy and institutions of the British Empire. And it was an extremely influential if it was to maintain and build its empire. And following his approach, the British Empire grew by 100,000 square miles a year between the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 and the American Civil War in 1865. And so he was a very influential character. And we're also put up there a little thing that I saw back in the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, which brings us in nicely actually to our guest who's coming up in a few minutes. A fellow here, Raj Pal from the Oxfordshire County Heritage and Arts Division, says that he had long been amused by the romanticised and misplaced sense of modern Scottish nationalism. And he points out that it comes as no surprise to me that Scottish officers were in the vanguard of putting down what he's referring to here as the Indian Mutiny. Given the sheer number of Scots in power at the dizzy heights of the empire, no wonder Indian historians often refer to the British Empire as really the Scottish Empire. And he says, Scots as an oppressed nation don't make me laugh. That's a brilliant quote from that chap Raj Pal there, which I found in the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery about 10 years ago. Whether that would still be allowed to be placed in the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery these days, who knows? Anyway, that was Charles William Pasley from Eskdalemuir, one of the driving forces behind the British Empire in the 1800s. And it was Arthur Herman who gave him that appellation, who said he created the idea of the modern British Empire. And he said that in his book, The Scots Invention of the Modern World. Now, just before we bring on David, question time for this badge. Folks, if you haven't done it before, send in your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person gets this King Charles III Coronation badge. A unique one, sent to you tomorrow, and we'll also throw in a copy, of course, of our latest magazine, Union of Crowns, which celebrates 420 years this year of the Union of the Crowns, when the Scotsman King James VI became King of England also and declared himself King of Great Britain. So the question is, for this badge, on what day and date is the coronation? Okay, easy question. Tell us what day and date at contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you could be in with a chance of winning this. And we'll mention the winner at the end of our programme. Now, folks, by much acclaim and by many people saying how much they enjoyed the last interview that we did with David just a few weeks ago, we're back on, but we're on for a longer time. We're on with David Scott of UK Column, and we're going to be discussing not just what's going on with the SNP, but looking a little bit deeper into just what they are all about. Now, if you are on TikTok, you won't see this, folks. You won't see it on TikTok. So head on over to youtube.com/UK, a force for good. Folks, please welcome David to the programme.
Hello.
Hello, David.
Hello. It's great to be back with you.
How are you this evening?
I'm very well. Is the sound okay?
Now, I can't actually hear David.
Oh dear.
I'm just wondering if anybody else can. Please, somebody tell me if you can. David, say something to us so we can hear you.
Sorry, well, yeah, I beg your pardon, everyone. I think the audience is able to hear me.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
I'm going to go back out. I'm going to
not.
go out and come in. You just entertain the folks, David.
Will do. Okay. Why I'm here today, ladies and gentlemen, is during the last interview, or at the end of the last interview, I said, look, I'd like to come back and have a chat about what exactly the SNP is. Because I've been watching this for quite a long time. I've been commentating on it, and I've been trying to understand what I'm seeing. Because it's a strange beast. Could you hear me now, Alistair? How are you doing?
I can. That's
Excellent.
all it takes.
Good stuff.
Going out and coming back in again. It's like switching it off and switching it on again.
It
just works every time.
So I was just explaining that I've been looking at the SNP for many years, and when I started to commentate on this, and I first went on Twitter, I got reinstated, incidentally, last night. I was in Twitter jail for nearly 2 years, but at Albion_Rover, my original Twitter handle is back. I'm pleased to say. And it had about 14,000 followers when I got banned, and it's still got nearly 13,000. So this has been quite good. I went on Twitter and I was immediately surrounded with all these angry nationalists trying to close me down, and they were doing the social justice warrior thing where they try and no platform you. They're trying to make anything that you think or wish to say unthinkable, unsayable, and it's an attack on, it's a kind of it's an attempt to demoralise their opposition. They all do it, and I fought a little bit and got a space in which I could express myself. This was fine. But I thought it was a very interesting experience going on to this platform and going in amongst, it used to be in those days, a very aggressive, very confident SNP supporting, left-wing, social justice warrior type atmosphere. Now, they're not anything like as confident now, and it's not just the last few weeks it's done that. This has been noticeable for years as the confidence in this body has been getting less and less, and they've been getting more and more brittle and more prone to run away from an argument and not have a discussion. But still, I was trying to understand what I was dealing with. I'll give you a couple of very quick examples. I've been to a few pro-yes, pro-SNP meetings over the years. Essentially as a journalist and or just out of sheer interest, just to understand what we're sharing a nation with. And one example was we had a Green Party politician giving a presentation to a largely SNP audience. They bought every word, right? This was an agenda which was far left, Marxist, would generate economic catastrophe, and there was not a word from this almost to a man and woman SNP supporting audience to say, actually, that's not a good idea. They bought it all. Why did they buy it? Because there was a lot of people who were much older. They were the people who were going down the golf club and bowling club, and they were socially conservative. And then the person from the Green Party, the very opposite of everything they believe in, came in, presented this, and they just, yes, that's fine, that's what we're going to do. So, really? Why do you buy that? Another quick example, I went along to an event in Perth, and I started asking questions, and very quickly I had at least 50% of the audience on my side, because they wanted to know the answer to the questions too, but they weren't allowed to ask. I was asking and they were then backing me up. I got a very distinct impression that most of them were not that dissimilar to me, but there was something strange going on in the movement that kind of suppressed them, and they weren't able to explore the differences they had with the higher echelons of the party. Right? That it was all about obedience. Why? So these are the questions I started with. Do you recognise these, Alistair?
Oh yeah, no question about that. There's always been a very strange beast. For me, I used to know a few chaps who were slightly older than me, and they were all SNP folk, but they were very conservative, with views on things that you couldn't really say publicly on Twitter, for example, without getting banned, and especially with like immigration and stuff like that, very much of the sort who believed that if Scotland could become independent, then you could not have any immigration, and you could solve all the problems that way. And so it was that very much old school right-wing types when I knew them. But what seemed to happen, as far as I can understand, is when Salmond came in, he had a group. Now, I forget what the name of the group was.
79.
That's it, the 79 group. So when they came in the 79 group, they wanted to push out all these old boys. And one of them, who I knew very well, was in fact one of the boys that actually did get literally pushed out. He got his membership I think he actually chucked in his own membership because he couldn't stand being around all these people who were not, other than being Scottish, who he had very little in common with. And it was that 79 group who brought in that whole internationalist agenda and moved it from a kind of old-fashioned Scottish grannies heel and hame, kilts and bagpipes party to a kind of revolutionary movement that was gonna push out and bring in push out the old and bring in the new as they saw it. So Salmond was at the forefront of that, but a lot of the people who are of the old type Scottish nationalists, they either left or they just became too old and then they died, and what was left of the party was very much internationalist, globalist, left wing in that sense. But and that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Salmond is critical, right? Because Salmond was a Maoist. Not a lot of people maybe know that, but his ideological master was Mao Zedong, and that's where he came from. And he moved the entire party to the left, him, McCaskill, Rosanna Cunningham, and the other members of the 79 group.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop there, it kept going. And it got even more extreme. And then they then captured other groups, right? So firstly, their big problem was always the Labour Party, right? Now, a lot of people felt that Scotland's big problem was the Labour Party, because if you go back to the 70s, you had this behemoth, this huge lump of a party that's controlled everything and was arrogant and lazy and fat and all the rest of it, corrupt. And they had to get round this somehow. Now, people may not get this, but Scottish politics, if you go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, even into the 60s, was very much split on religious lines. Protestant working class voted Conservative, pretty much, and Roman Catholic working class voted Labour. So there was a huge Labour supporting group within the Roman Catholic community in West Central Scotland, and the SNP eventually managed to capture that. Now, the history of that particular voting block is very interesting, because it made Scottish Labour what it was. Because the socialist movements all around Europe were all atheist, anti-Christian, anti-church, anti-clerical, apart from one, right, which was the Scottish one, because they saw an opportunity to capture the Roman Catholic vote, which was disaffected from the Liberal Party that they had supported because of Irish Home Rule failing, and there was an opportunity. So they seized the opportunity and they got the allegiance of the Roman Catholic vote in West Central Scotland. That was their power base. In order to shift the Labour Party out of the way, the SNP had to capture that power base, and they went after this. Now, you saw the most extreme parts of that community, which is virulently anti-British, anti-monarchy, who will use phrases like butcher's apron to refer to the Union flag, things like that, coming into the SNP, particularly in Glasgow and the west of Scotland. And the SNP took on a different, and actually quite alien, Sinn Féin-esque, Sinn Féin light kind of atmosphere in some places, in some constituencies. And another aspect of this is the very, I mean, when we're talking about a minority from the Roman Catholic community, but that minority, as well as being full of resentment towards all things British, is also incidentally full of resentment towards all things Roman Catholic. Right? They became very anti-clerical, very anti-church, and very bitter towards Roman Catholicism and the Roman Catholic Church. So it wasn't a religious thing, but the bitterness and the historical divide remained, even though there was the religious divide had moved on to something else. It became virulently anti-Christian across the board. So this is what started to be captured by the SNP, and they welcomed it. They didn't resist it. They didn't say, hold on, we're not sure about some of these ideas. It was all welcomed in, because the idea of what the SNP were selling, and they were doing this blatantly, is whatever you want, Indy's the answer. Right? So someone would come and say, I want to have tiny, small government, minarchist state, maximum personal freedom, low taxes, all the rest of it. And they'll say, vote for Indy. If you want that, we get Indy, you can argue for that and you make that happen. And someone come and say, I want a Marxist state. You vote for Indy. You know, we get Indy, you can make that happen. So everything was being taken on board, and nothing was there was no editorial control. There was no fact checking. There was no checking as to whether the ideas they were importing were right or wrong. So they got so there's the Irish element of it. You had, I think, I'm not so familiar with this. I think there was an Indian subcontinent part of it, because they got an awful lot of support in West Central Scotland, where the largely Pakistani first, second, third generation immigrant community lives. So they managed to capture that from Labour mostly, and again that's playing to a different sort of anti-Britishness, one that comes from often 50 years of Pakistani or Indian state propaganda through their own schooling system to create their national myth, and their national myth is quite anti-British because of the history of British rule, which they are, I mean, I would put unfairly painting, but they're in the process of creating their own national mythology to bind their own state together, and Britain's a comfortable target for that. So that's been pushed out through the schooling system. So there's an opportunity for anti-Britishness to win support there. And then, much more significantly than even either of those two, you then get into the whole cultural Marxist agenda, which is playing out all across the West. Now, that's a view that opposes everything that Britain ever stood for, right? It's very anti-white, it's very anti-civilization, it's very anti-Western civilization, it's anti-church, right? So all of these ideas are collected as well, become part of, welcomed in, become part of the party. So you end up with this very, very disparate party of people who don't really agree about anything. If you look at the extreme part of the former Roman Catholic community in West Central Scotland, who are now anti-Roman Catholic, anti-church, very left-wing, very Marxist, very anti-clerical, and you compare them to the Muslim community in the same city, who are socially conservative, and they agree on almost nothing. And you end up with this great range. What's the unifying idea? So what I'm going to put to you tonight for your comment is the unifying idea of Scottish nationalism is anti-Britishness.
That's something that I would generally agree with. Absolutely. That's a good point. I've noticed that the most virulent people who attack us rhetorically on social media have a very anti-British strain. It's not, oh, we disagree with you because you're wrong here regarding who should be in control of income tax or the seabed or something like that. They just hate the British and the British institutions, particularly, for example, the monarchy. And but to an extent which is just like so kind of strange, you know, you wouldn't want to be in their head, because one would be a very angry man if one were in their head, and in two ways that you don't really understand why they're even that bothered, really. But there's clearly they've got the proverbial bee in their bonnet about that. So anti-Britishness is definitely an element, and that wasn't an element in the old school types that I'm thinking about. I mean, when I think of one or two of the old boys that I knew, they were out very strongly for the Queen, very strongly, almost embarrassingly strongly for the Queen. So, I mean, you can imagine that they had nothing in common with this new vanguard of the SNP, who rode that 1960s, 1970s kind of wave that was fashionable, and that was coming to a head as well of anti the current system, kind of alienated intellectuals. I read that phrase in a wee book that I'm reading at the moment, alienated intellectuals, which, if you could call Alex Salmond an intellectual, he was certainly part of that sort of attitude. I don't know if he's maybe moderated, mellowed a bit as he's got older, but certainly that young lot were certainly that way inclined at that time.
So if we take that as a starting point, the unifying idea is anti-Britishness. Right? A couple of things I'd point out. One, it's anti. Okay, now you get this through the whole. I'll try and get in a little bit without going into the weeds of it, into what critical theory, postmodern cultural Marxist ideas, what they all do. But they all do one thing. They relentlessly criticise the thing they want to kill. But they don't have anything to put in its place. They don't have any other ideas. It's just criticism. So the idea is you criticise and criticise and criticise, and the thing you're attacking will collapse under the weight of the relentless attacks. And once it's collapsed, you can put something in its place, or something will emerge. But there's never any discussion as to what that something should be. Really.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. I've noticed that as well, and that's one of the most frustrating things about it. It's just, I think somebody once coined the term the culture of critique, which is you just criticize and criticize, but what is it that you're going to put into place? They don't actually have anything to put into place in it, as far as I can see. And it's worse than that. They actually specifically avoid suggesting anything, because if they suggest anything, then they become right-wing and establishment, and then they've got to defend their position and defend their ideas, and they'll be attacked. So they don't want that. They want to be the ones who are always complaining, but never building. So this is one problem. So one of the big problems with it, it's anti. It's not pro-Scots, it's anti. It's anti-something. In this case, it's anti-British. The other weird aspect of this is the Scots are British, right? So we end up with the bizarre, I mean, and it really is bizarre sight of a party that claims to be the political expression of the Scottish nation. Because it's anti-British, it's also anti-Scots, because the Scots are British. And that's, I call them the anti-Scots, because everything that Scotland ever stood for, they hate, right? Education, right? Not only are they wrecking it, they're trying to undermine it. They're trying to transform it. They're trying to change it into an instrument of indoctrination. It's no longer education. Education, as understood in Scotland, no longer exists in terms of what's happening at the highest levels of government policy. They're anti-Christian. Scotland, in many ways, was a Christian nation par excellence, because it was the one that had a national covenant between us and God. Mm-hmm. But they're anti-Christian. Scotland stood for hard work and industry, though they're interested in handouts and not doing anything, living off somebody else. Scotland stood for an intellectual quality which was reasonably high. It stood for
I mean, there are problems with it, but Enlightenment values did come out of very largely out of Scotland, right? So they created the Enlightenment thought. Now there are problems with Enlightenment thought, but it most certainly has got Scotland written all the way through. And the SNP and the Green Party and all the rest of it, they hate Enlightenment ideas. They hate Christianity. They hate industry. They hate hard work. They hate production. They hate all of these things. Everything that is Scottish, they detest. So they become, you have this strange position of this party claims to represent Scotland actually is opposed to everything we ever were or ever really wanted to be. And then, of course, you get the personal, nasty, bitter attacks on individual Scots. I'm sure you've experienced some of this, and I certainly know if you look at the Twitter feed of someone like Murdo Fraser, who seems to wind up the Nationalists quite a lot, and God bless him for that, you're getting all of these nasty personal attacks. I've had it, right? Go back to England where you belong.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
that's that sort of message, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now, you know, and probably from someone who's not that Scottish, right? And I can't actually be flanked on the Scottish thing, okay? The woman who put the crown on King Robert the Bruce's head, that's Granny. That's my 28th great grandmother, right? So they're not going to flank me on playing the Scottish card, right? Who's more Scottish than the other? They'll not get round that. But away to England where you belong is the reaction. So I'm thinking, well, that's interesting because here I am Scottish and they don't want me here, right? They want someone else. Sometimes it's expressed, I would rather swap you for an immigrant from sub-Saharan Africa, right? Without actually explaining why. And again, it manifests itself in this strange anti-Scottishness. And initially that really puzzled me as to why. But there is a logic to why. Because they hate a certain set of ideas. Those sets of ideas were exemplified by Britain, the British Empire, and particularly by Scotland and the Scots. And they hate the ideas, therefore they hate us. And that is a bizarre thing to have running your country. But that's what we've got.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said, David. And I wonder to what extent as well, it's on top of the things that you've said there, it's simply because many of I read the National every day so that other people don't have to, as I always say. But I've got one or two letters here from yesterday's paper, which I'll just read out in a moment. And they tell me, as they always do, that there's quite a lot of people who don't even understand Scottish history. They don't even know about it. Basic fundamental things like one of the themes that runs through letters of complaint to the National is that the Supreme Court in London is an English court. They don't understand that it's actually the head of it's the Supreme Court for all the laws, all the civil laws in Britain, and that it's made up of judges from all parts of the United Kingdom. They just see it as, because it's in London, it's somehow just English. And there's a lot of them, a lot of letters. There was one yesterday complaining about how we should never have accepted the jurisdiction of an English court over our own Scots court. You know, that was in yesterday's National. I'll cut it out because I'm going to do a Busting Indie Myths explaining for those people who don't know just what the Supreme Court is all about. And then there's people who think that King Charles is simply the King of England, that he's not the King of Scotland. And so these are people who are judging him simply on his accent because he's got a kind of refined English accent, so he must just be the King of England. They don't understand how the British crown came about, which we've detailed here, the family tree from your man Robert the Bruce there, going right down through James VI, going right down to the Union of the Crowns. going right down through James VI's granddaughters until they found George I, who became the first Hanoverian king, a direct descendant from James VI, a direct descendant from Robert the Bruce. So the basic things like that, they don't seem to know, and you would think that they would know that. They might not. They might want their own Scottish king, for example, but it's totally wrong to say that Charles is simply the King of England. I mean, it's so historically wrong as to say you don't even know the very basics of the sort of thing that you're complaining about. So there's a lot of that.
The reaction to the monarchy is a touchstone item, right? Because you have the monarchy was the monarchy line that matters, right? Stretches back from the one in London to, before that it was based in Edinburgh, and it was a Scots monarchy. Before that it was based in Dalriada in Argyll, and before that it was based in Ireland. And you can get the line of kings all the way back. Now, if you go before Ireland, it gets really interesting, and that's maybe not one for tonight, but there are ways of tackling it back even further from that.
Oh, I know what you're referring to. Yeah.
So you've got this line that binds all of the British Isles together, and it runs for millennia, right? So this is our heritage, this is our history, and it is Scots in the fullest degree. It's arguably more Scots than it is English. It's got a longer history and pedigree here than there, and it's something that Scotland historically held very dear. What happened when the English executed Charles I? The first thing the Scots did, as soon as they heard, is they acclaimed his son as king. Right? So there was always a king. Might have been in exile, might have only had a few people around him, but there was always a king. We were never without a king, queen,
yes,
monarch.
Yes.
Right? And it meant more to the Scots than it did to the English. Mm-hmm. That's why the and that's a big part of what the Jacobites were all about as well, right? Because they felt they had a duty to the king. And you've now got the SNP, and Salmon in particular, because Salmon's coming out of the woodwork. Salmon was always lying on this, but he's not lying anymore. It's a socialist republic. That's what's on offer. So we're going to take, when was Kenneth MacAlpin? 800 something, right? So even if you just take, you don't cover the Dalriada and Ireland, but if you just come from there, we're going to take 1,200 years of Scottish history and just going to put it in the blender and hit frappe, because they don't care about Scotland. They don't care. In fact, they hate it. They don't want any of the things that we always were. They're convinced they can make us anew. Right? They're convinced that they can transform us. We will be the new socialist man, not the Scots of old. I don't think they will pull that off.
No, absolutely. I don't see that they can. It's interesting. I like the way you said they basically do hate Scotland. You know, they might say that, oh, they love it, but, well, what is it that makes Scotland? What's the history, the institutions, the ideologies and so on of the past which have brought us to here today? Oh, we don't want anything to do with that. No, it's year zero. It's the whole year zero. We can shape the mind and soul of man anew simply through, and that's been an ideology that's always been part of the human psyche, unfortunately. I mean, the French Revolution, for example, that was all about starting again. Pol Pot, who probably came up with the phrase year zero, I'm not sure, but he was all about that, as was Mao, of course. Just start again, out with the old, in with the new, whatever that's going to be. So yeah, always those kind of politicians. I wanted to just while I'm looking at another letter yesterday from the National, this guy here, he's talking about, he's annoyed that Lord Frost has suggested that the SNP should be reined in, the diplomatic missions should be reined in. He's annoyed about Lord Frost, and he's calling him a disgrace to humanity, and which is a bit strong, but don't worry about it, because this chap is at pains to tell us how normal he is. He goes, it is incumbent on us all to become personal ambassadors for Scotland. The world will judge us as individual people and recognise Scotland as a nation if we continually make the point that we Scots are oppressed people, oppressed by the UK. I am in Italy just now and will visit several other nations. We can do a lot by interacting normally and positively, letting the world know Scotland is a victim of insidious and systematic oppression.
Right,
that's meant to be normal. That's
Yeah.
how you're going to convince people, by behaving normally, by telling them that Scotland is a victim of insidious and systematic oppression. I'm sorry, if you came up to me in the bar and started on like that, you're the last person I'm going to believe is a normal chap. Mr. Tim Warner. I was just thinking, Tim Warner sounds like a name you could trust. But apparently
I've got a little insight into this.
Parody. I don't know.
No. I think that's real. I'm convinced that's real.
It's a classic of its kind. I file these in a file, and when I'm feeling a little bit depressed, I pull them out the drawer and have a look at them and read them and enjoy them once more.
Let me give you a little insight into that mindset, right? Because you're reacting correctly that that's not normal. Now, I've met this before, but not in Scotland. I've met it in England. I've had people who are English nationalists, who are pretty much indistinguishable from Scottish nationalists. English nationalists saying, we are being oppressed. We English are an oppressed people. We English are oppressed by the British. And how does that work? And they're absolutely for real. Now, I think what it is see this attack on Britishness, right? The whole woke attack, the cultural Marxist attack, the relentless attack on colonialism, on our history, on the empire, right? The people who are English nationalists are saying the English are oppressed by the British. Despite being 90% of the population, they're being oppressed by the British. Whatever the British is defined in their eyes, I don't know. What they're actually doing is they're looking for victim status. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're looking for victim status is they have been intellectually defeated by the left. Because the left the left used to be about class, right? It's not about class, it's now about groups, right? It's about group identity. And the groups are on a scale. And it's a victimhood scale. So to get more credit, you've got to get yourself further up the victimhood scale. And they are so intellectually defeated by this ideology that they are trying to get up the victimhood scale. Now, that guy who wrote that letter, he'll be white, he'll almost certainly be heterosexual, and he's male. He doesn't stand a chance on the victimhood scale. He's kidding himself. He's never going to succeed in the victimhood scale. But he thinks he can do something by painting himself as a victim so he can join in the victim narrative with everybody else and not have the difficulty of actually resisting, right? Because it's intellectual surrender, it's intellectual defeat that's playing out. That's why they write like that. It's not because they actually believe it. It's because they're so blown away by the intellectual assault from the left that they're saying, okay, we'll be victims too. If we're victims too, will you not say mean things about us anymore? Right? And this is the opposite of what we should be doing. Right? We should be pushing forward our own intellectual analysis of the situation that looks at things that they can't handle, you know, truth, logic, reason, things like that. Not that relies on their falsehoods, right? We shouldn't be trying to adopt the lying ideology that we're trying to oppose on the mistaken belief that, well, it won't hurt us too badly if we give in to it, because the ideology we're opposing has no, it will give no quarter. It does not accept apology. It doesn't accept it doesn't accept it doesn't accept what used to be called in a Christian world repentance. Right? You'll never wash yourself clean of your sin of being white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, or whatever it happens to be, whatever the rap sheet says. And the people who are trying to surrender their way to acceptance by that ideology will never find it. Right? They have to stand up and actually think for themselves and actually start to resist the kind of corrosive effects of that ideology and not simply give in to it.
Yes. It's about what is for us and for everybody really to reinvigorate the culture, is a phrase that I read the other day, is that rather than backing down in the face of cultural assaults, to the extent that one engages, one should engage with, you know, wisdom, with value, and work to reinvigorate, basically, because there does come a stage, I suppose, in every nation's life that it needs to be reinvigorated, that things need to be remembered, and they need to be put out and explained in a new way. And then sometimes they have to be explained for the first time because people have never heard about them. And that's what we try to do to an extent that we can here at A Force for Good as well, with our publications, you know, reminding people of critical elements in British history, such as, for example, the Union of the Crowns. We've got a whole series lined up that we'll be speaking about and putting into magazine forms, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, over the next few months and years, especially dealing with all these issues in British history that need to be brought out and remembered and stood up for and explained, because I do see a lot of the people who criticise elements of the past, they don't really know anything about the past, and so it's a matter of really educating them, as much as one can get annoyed with them for taking that role, but then you think, well, they don't actually know anything about these things, so it's for us to try to educate as much as possible.
Well, they don't know, and you mentioned, as you in your introduction, you were talking about the Scots' invention in the modern world and the nature of the empire, particularly in India, being, at least at one point, a Scottish empire. I understand it got to 80% Scottish in the Indian civil service before they introduced the exam to cut the Scottish contingent down to size. So it was, I mean, we'd stolen the empire. I mean, really, it was quite striking. But a lot of good was done. There's one of my favourite stories is the chap who Scottish, Christian governor of part of the subcontinent, had announced that the practice of suttee, of throwing the living widow of a deceased man onto the funeral pyre was to cease. And he got a delegation that said, look, this is our culture, you can't do that. It's our culture to do this. You've come in here from your foreign land, this is India, this is an Indian way of life. you know, this is our tradition. This is what we do. And he thought about this and he said, well, I hear what you're saying. In Scotland, we also have traditions. One of our traditions is if someone burns alive a widow, we hang them. Let's both keep to our traditions. Stopped at stone dead, right? And you know, there's plenty of good to be found, and there's plenty of things to be understood, right? There was a reason that the biggest all-volunteer army in the history of the world was the British Indian Army, right? Some of it was economically driven and all the rest of it, but there was more to it than that. My grandfather, my father's father, spent 8 years before the colours in India, and he came back and said, "Well, I felt we were doing a lot of good for the people out there. We were a positive." He felt it was a very positive thing that was actually being done for the native population. And if you look at even the worst parts, and the worst parts are few and far between, but Amritsar is usually singled out. The Amritsar massacre is usually singled out as kind of the low point. And I did look into that just a little. I'm by no means expert on it. But the person who ordered the troops to open fire, I found out a little bit about him. And where was he born?
Ireland.
India. No,
India.
He was
Irish though.
He was Irish extraction, but he was Anglo-Indian.
Right.
He was born in India, raised in India, served in the army in India, and the reason he gave is if we don't stop this now, there'll be 1 million dead in a fortnight. Now, the thing which he feared in 1919, wasn't it, did happen in 1947. So I don't think it was necessarily that he was just stupid. And although I'm not defending what he did or saying he got it right, I think the idea of some pink-haired liberals in a wine bar in London criticising him without any understanding of the time, the culture, they don't care about learning anything about it. They don't care about any of the subtleties. They don't care about any of the realities. It's an easy hit.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what they go, well, we shouldn't be rolling over. And we shouldn't be in any way afraid of the truth. The truth's the truth. But you've got to understand it properly. We shouldn't be backing away from it. But neither should we be closed down by the scare words and the scare phrases. You know, the empire bad. You get other things like, trans rights are human rights, Black Lives Matter. These things which are meant to shut down, they're meant to be unanswerable, and they're meant to shut down any pushback. They're meant to close you down. They're meant to close down thought and debate. We shouldn't be falling for any of that.
Yeah.
All of it is very interesting when you start to analyse it, and when you push back against it, you find that the ideologies, A, aren't what they claim to be, right? Because there's a huge amount of deception. And B, cannot actually stand up to scrutiny. They're based on the assumption that you won't scrutinise them. Mm-hmm. And when you do, it gets very interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we need more people in politics who can do the sort of thing that you say, that can stand up and explain things in a fearless way, in that manner. And that's one of the things that's really lacking, I think, in Britain, and has been for a while, is politicians of a calibre who understand those sorts of issues and can make it their own and can articulate those sorts of things, because it's very easy for a politician just to go along with the herd. If the herd is saying, look, we're just going to go along with this whole BLM thing, we're not going to stir the pot in any way, people will just go along with it. That the number of politicians, I can't think of any British politicians who stand up and make a case when statues, for example, are being attacked, to make a case for a bloke, and they should be able to do that. I mean, I realised we were in big trouble, and I've said this before, when when during the height of the lockdown, right, we're all locked down, we're all made to be afraid, and for some reason the BLM thing came up at that time, and somebody had scrawled racist on Winston Churchill's statue, which is just a few hundred yards down from where Boris Johnson, the PM, was living at the time. A man who had written a biography on Churchill, who was trying to associate himself with Churchill thereby, to try to kind of piggyback on his legacy. So he wrote a biography on Churchill, which is a clever way of doing it, I suppose. But even he wouldn't defend Churchill against that accusation. And he took days before he came out. And the first people that he criticised were the quote-unquote bother boys who had gone along to try to defend the Churchill statue. So I thought, we're totally lost. If that's the calibre of our Prime Minister in a situation like that, I mean, and he's responding to the powers that are around him, he obviously feels he can't stand up and defend Churchill from accusations. So you think, that's where we are. So it's really down to people like ourselves and others and grassroots groups who are willing to take these things on. Unless you can think of any notable politicians in Britain who would take the line that you're taking.
No, I don't think so. I mean, Boris's weakness, I think, was a surprise. I mean, I wasn't expecting much.
No.
But
just as well.
He came in on this wave of enthusiasm, right? And he'd made himself the champion of Brexit, even though he was quite weak in how he did that. Right? Remember, I'd rather die in the ditch than sign that document. Then he signed it. Where's the dead body in the ditch, Boris? Right? He was being threatened with all sorts of things, including a Scottish court. Remember those things? A Scottish court taking on his legal identity and signing on his behalf. Right? That was Joanna Cherry was trying to push that particular genius idea. I thought that was very interesting. Who knew that could happen? And he was being threatened with arrest. And he should have said, arrest me then. Because he had the support of the people, but he didn't. He didn't have the guts. Now, he then somehow struggled over the line on Brexit to some degree, wrapped himself in the flag, got a huge mandate from the British people, and then along comes COVID. He lasted 3 days. 3 days, and he sold us out to the COVID hysteria. All he had to do is say, I'm not buying it. We're fine.
Yeah.
Look at the facts. Show me the stats.
That was particularly annoying for me because I, for most of my life, had campaigned for Brexit on the basis that it was part of this whole idea of British freedom, apparently British freedom and liberty, and that we don't want to be run and controlled by an unelected bureaucracy in Brussels because it's bad for our freedom and liberty, and so on and so forth. And I always made a big play of that during the 90s and the 2000s when I was doing other things. And then we finally get Brexit on the 31st of January. Okay, wasn't a full Brexit, but it kind of, a lot of it was Brexit. 31st of January, within 6 weeks, the country was literally a prison state.
Yeah.
I thought, great. That was not what I expected from Brexit. Thank you very much. Now, if he had been true to the concept of Brexit, he would have stood up for that as well, and he'd have said, look, we didn't leave the European Union to lock our people in their house seats.
Yeah. And this is one of the points that I try and make in the column is you can't look for a politician to do it for you. You can't look for a leader to actually come and lead unless the people are at a point where they'll respond. Right? We have to be knowledgeable about who we are as a nation, what we believe in. We've got to discuss it. We've got to come to some reasonably harmonious agreement as to what it is we are, what Britain means. But one of the things that always annoys me about the nationalist idea is they try simultaneously to say there are no borders, right? Because the nationalists don't believe in borders. We will have immigration without limit. If you listen to them, everyone can come to Scotland. Everyone's welcome. We're just so wonderful, right? That's what they actually say. whether they'll do it's another matter. But Ireland's doing it. Ireland's got some serious problems in this area, right? And so they say but we don't want borders. We don't want any borders anywhere. We don't want any separation between one sort of person and another. But we're nothing like the English, right? Okay, is that true? And they don't know, you said before, they don't know their own history. They don't know their own history. They haven't read the Declaration of Arbroath, because that says quite clearly our stock is Scythian. Where do the Saxons in England trace their ancestry back to? The Scythians, same people. The fact that they came overland and our lot came via Spain, Portugal, Ireland and Argyll, and we all ended up here, is somewhat miraculous, but the history of it is it's the same people. The people from North Wales used to live in southern Scotland, and they all moved down en masse. The idea that we are somehow there's some sort of ethnic divide that more or less orientates itself with Hadrian's Wall is just nonsense. It's nonsense. And the idea that there's a cultural divide, there's a very slight cultural divide in Britain. It's not a huge one, but there is one. It's nowhere near the border. If you go down to Lancashire, Yorkshire, let alone Northumbria and Cumbria, Devon, Cornwall, Wales, right? Anything that's not the Saxon part of England, you'll find people that are very, very much like the Scots. And if you go to the Saxon part of England, I think I do pick up a cultural difference there, but it's pretty slight, and it's not an ethnic difference.
Which just to elaborate, which areas would you call England the Saxon part?
Well, it's kind of the Midlands and the southeast.
Mm-hmm.
So it is. There have been studies into your DNA studies, and you can pick out the different parts of it. Scotland's like Britain in miniature. Scotland's got everything in it.
Yes.
Yes. So ethnically, we're Britain in miniature. There's no separation. There's no ethnic separation between Scotland and England, and they try and pretend that there's some difference. It's just not true. We're going to call out the lies. And I saw a question coming up about the current events, so you might want to, so if you want to return to that before we run out of time.
What was that one?
There was a question about Nicola Sturgeon possibly facing arrest. Yeah. The point I was making on my newly reinstated Twitter account today is that we actually have a situation where the possibility that Nicola Sturgeon will end up in Compton Vale and have to share a cell with a male rapist is small but non-zero.
But that's how some people would put the risk of various things, isn't it? Absolutely.
Because she is facing a very difficult situation.
Oh yeah.
The nationalists seem to think there's a fair chance that she could face arrest, and we're living in very, very strange times, and we're seeing. And the reason I was keen to come on and talk about the background of what the SNP is, right? It's this amalgamation of anti-British resentments from various sources that's formulated around this party, which was not the SNP of old. Remember the SNP of old, 75, campaigned to leave the EU.
Yes.
Right? It was a very different beast. It's not Scottish, it's international, as you quite rightly say. And it's in very many ways it's anti-Scottish. It's opposed to everything we ever believed in as a nation. So we've got this strange alliance amongst our country. They've got their hold on political power, but it's a very unstable thing. Because it is this strange alliance and the ideas don't make very much sense. What have you got Humza now pushing? Something that's been called communism light, because that's all they've got. we're going to rerun communism again because this time it'll work. Why has it never worked before? Why will it work this time? Because Scottish, because we're special, right?
Yes.
Really? Are we special? Well, do we have borders? No, we can't have borders because that would be unfair. Right? It's not a coherent ideology. It can't formulate anything that's cogent, that's actually hangs together. So when trouble comes, how will it react? I think it might become very unstable.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's only the anti-Britishness that holds it together. And this is where, a final thing I'd like to say, our opposition is failing. Because the opposition has never made the case for Britain as a nation as it used to be. We're now seeing Britishness being applied to woke ideology and tolerance for all sorts of perversion because that's British values. That's starting to come up, and that's a lying misuse of the phrase. We need to see some form of opposition in Scotland standing up and explicitly explaining what Britishness is, what the British are, who the British are.
Absolutely.
And doing so in an unashamed and unafraid way, because that is the bit that we're not meant to say, and that's the bit that ultimately I think they're frightened that we remember.
I like it, and we're going to make that our mission statement. I think the last few sentences there is exactly the sort of thing that A Force for Good, in our way, try to do, and others should step up to that as well, because the people who are trying to define Britishness just simply don't understand any of what it is in the first place, and the identity as it actually is, the institutions, the characteristics associated with it, along with the values, many of which you've spoken about tonight, of religious as well as Enlightenment values and other things attached to that. And I heard somebody who was quite famous a few years ago, used to be president of the United States and is hoping to run again, and on my TikTok it came up, and he was saying to me, he said, the future belongs to the patriots, not the globalists. And I thought, that's a good line that I'm going to remember and use. The future belongs to the patriots, not the globalists. And the SNP is a globalist party, and look what's happening to it at the moment. So I think that's the positive note to end on. David, we've been speaking for an hour and it's gone very quickly. We're going to cut this down. We'll put the full 1 hour interview up on YouTube within the next 72 hours, and we'll look at this video and we'll cut 2 or 3 pieces from it for our TikTok and for YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. And if they do as well as the last interviews, the last clips with you and I, then they'll be seen by thousands of people. So that's some good work that we've done, and I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching and who has sent in the comments as well. Hopefully we flashed a few of your comments up on the screen. David Scott of UK Column, which is ukcolumn.org, and you're also on the UK Column is on facebook.com/UK Column and on twitter.com/UK Column, and your personal page is twitter.com/Albion_Rover. Albion Rover, is that a football team?
Albion Rovers Albion Rovers is a football team. A quick explanation why it's Albion Rover, right? Firstly, my brother took me to the football when I was 3, right? And we could go to either Airdrie or Albion Rovers. Airdrie had a wall round the pitch at Broomfield, and I couldn't see over, and they had quite big crowds, so if I went further up the terrace and I couldn't see the pitch. And Albion Rovers had a fence, so I could see the men on the pitch, so I preferred Albion Rovers when I was very wee. Also, Albion means Britain, and Rover means wanderer, another name for which is Scot.
Of course, that's the point of it, isn't it? Wonderful. Okay, David, let's have you back on again at some time that we'll agree on. But for tonight, fantastic show. Thank you very much for all your thoughts.
I've got a UK column event in Motherwell coming up on the 22nd of June. So we'll send you details near the time. Hopefully we'll put the word out on that. Maybe you and some of your viewers will be able to come along and meet the UK column team.
Definitely. Please do keep us informed about that, David. Okay. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Cheers. Bye now. Wonderful. Wonderful. David Scott, folks. And thank you to everybody. Stuart says, great stuff. You too. Harry says, certainly an interesting talk from both of you. Christopher says, thank you, David and Alistair. Very thought-provoking. Debbie Beer says that she's now following David on Twitter. Thank you very much to our guest this evening, David Scott. Now, this was our special 1 hour and a half show. Now, we have a winner. We asked the question for this gallus wee badge that says Charles III Coronation, God Save the King. The simple question, on what day and date is the coronation? And the answer is Saturday the 6th of May, and the winner is Debbie Beer. There you go, Debbie. Fantastic. That will be in the post to you. That's a good one. Can add that to your fantastic collection. Good stuff. Now, folks, what else is there to say regarding the coronation? Yes, just a reminder that at 5 o'clock on Coronation Day, there is going to be a gathering of people. Everybody who's pro-UK is going to be going in to George Square for just a massive party, basically, at 5 o'clock. From 5 o'clock, that the coronation will have passed by then. You'll have had time to watch it on the telly, and it'll be Saturday afternoon. Hopefully the weather will be nice and hot, and it'll be just a matter of going in to George Square. Take whatever you want in, bring your flags, bring your food and other things, and let's have a party in George Square on Saturday the 6th of May. Please do share that information. Great stuff. We will be back next week just with a normal 1 hour programme, but we will have a guest next week as well, and we're looking forward to that, and we will see you. So it just remains for me to say thank you, everybody, for the great show tonight. Debbie says woohoo. Great stuff. Super Typist says I didn't know that. TC says thank you for a fantastic chat. Stuart says well done, Debbie. Kathleen says congratulations, Debbie. And another thing, our summer programme of Coronation Street Stalls is going to be starting up again very soon. And so if you would like to join us on the street in Glasgow with one of our street stalls, it's always a good few hours. It's always good fun to meet the great British public here in the great British city of Glasgow. So if you'd like to join us and you haven't done before, please do contact us and tell us. But that's our summer programme of Coronation Street Stalls. Will be starting up very soon, and we'll be having them every month through the summer. Good stuff. It just remains for me to say, folks, God bless the United Kingdom. We'll see you next week. God save the King. See you next week. Great stuff, folks. Thanks for everybody who was watching. You wouldn't necessarily see the full interview because that was on the computer here, but thanks otherwise for all your comments. Sorry couldn't get to them all. We'll be back next week. Take care, folks.